first visit by a US leader to the Chinese capital in 8 years was huge on pomp and circumstance, but light on diplomatic breakthroughs. Trump had his work cut out on his 2-day visit, as this was never going to be enough time to discuss so many contentious issues. Trump's main challenge was the talks were on issues of his own creation. The trade war Trump launched is not going well, and in China he had no leverage. No major announcements have been made since Trump arrived back in the US. China agreed to purchase US agricultural products, but no deal was made on Boeing aircrafts. President Xi Jinping threw Trump enough of a bone so that he can argue back in Washington that the US and China will cooperate to tamp down trade tensions, and most importantly, end the war in Iran. Trump took a $20 trillion entourage of CEOs seeking greater access to Asia's biggest economy. That delegation, representing a market value equivalent to China's annual gross domestic product, stole the spotlight from the camera-hungry Trump. Unfettered access to rare earths, AI coordination, reopening the Strait of Hormuz appear to have all been left on the table for another time. In the end, what came out of this visit was just to continue talking. Saudi Arabia is discussing the idea of a non-aggression pact between Middle East states and Iran in order to manage regional tensions once the US-Israeli war with the Iran ends. Gulf states have been concerned since the US and Israel launched the war against Iran that they would be left with a wounded, more hawkish regime on their doorstep once the conflict ends, and the large American military presence in the region is scaled back. Riyadh is eyeing as a potential model the 1970s Helsinki process that eased tensions in Europe during the Cold War. The Helsinki Accords, signed in 1975 by the US, European countries, and the Soviet Union and its allies, sought to address security issues and foster greater economic cooperation between rival powers. Many European capitals and EU institutions have swung behind the Saudi idea and have urged other Gulf countries to support it. They view it as the best way to avoid future conflict and provide Tehran with guarantees that it also would not be attacked. With the US unable to provide security to its Gulf defense partners, it seems regional monarchies are now realizing they are on their own and need to do formal agreements with Iran. Cuba is nearing collapse as its electrical grid has failed, with over 20 hours of blackouts in some parts of the Caribbean island. The island has run out of oil as its largest provider, Venezuela, has been taken over by the US, who also now has a functional blockade against Cuba in place. The energy crises will become a food, economic, and political crisis. We are nearing a humanitarian catastrophe in Cuba. The hope of the American administration is that this will trigger mass protests that will tear down the Cuban government. This was also the plan in Iran, which didn't turn out as planned. Negotiations are ongoing between the Cubans and Americans, but the Trump administration wants the Cuban government gone. But much like the Iran war, the administration hasn't thought about what happens next. The strategy to break the Cuban government is also breaking Cuban society. And if the US sees this strategy through, it will have to impose a new order on the country. This will require a military intervention to install the replacement system and then rebuild the country from the ground up. That best case scenario is a 20-year program, which was also what Iraq and Afghanistan turned into, and they are not remotely close to being called success stories.